Welcome, everyone. I'm Keith Blevins, and this is Brett Chitty. Um, and welcome to our first meeting that we've had in this format in quite a while. So we're looking forward to this. Um, my colleague, uh, Brett Chitty, is going to um, take over, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Brett.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the first of the youth series with Kate Blevins and myself, Brett Kitty. We're glad to have you here today. One of the things that had occurred for both Kate and I lately is we have transitioned from focusing on a particular feeling toward the nature of feelings. The thing about focusing on a particular feeling, it tends to drive prescription ideas, what do I need to do to get particular feelings? And when we discovered by talking about the nature of feeling, we were talking differently. We were respecting all feelings rather than what's good and bad. So what we're going to do today is that I'm going to be talking about the nature of feeling, what we do with those feelings, and how they arise. So I would like to bring your attention to a quote from Sticky Banks. He says, an important thing to realize is that universal mind and personal mind are not two minds thinking differently, but two ways of using the same mind. Which is quite fascinating in and of itself. So I wondered what that meant. Right? So it's easy to say, yeah, I've got two ways of using the mind, but what are they? And Sticky Banks said there are two ways of using the mind, not three or four or five or six, just two. I explored this, right, and I realized that one possible interpretation, my own interpretation, not this, is that there are two ways of understanding everything in this universe. Absolutely everything. Okay. Including and perhaps especially feelings. So there are two ways to understand feelings. This is brand new for me because I'm like, there are two ways to understand feeling. I thought I understood feeling, but if there are two and I have an understanding of feeling, then what is the other way of understanding feelings? That's what I was interested in. I kept learning from Sticky Banks as much as I could, and I think I got somewhere. And this is what led us to moving away from quality of feeling towards the nature of feelings. Right? So two ways of using the same mind, two dimensions of using the same mind, two paradigms of using the same mind. Whatever the terms you want to use doesn't matter. There are two ways of using it. All right? So with that in mind, what I'm going to do first, I have my trusty whiteboard behind me, which has served me well. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a red line down the middle. Okay, and on one side is one way of using the mind, and on the other side is the other way of using the mind. I think for most people, maybe all, I don't know. We 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 think of feeling as being on a ladder or on a linear spectrum. Okay, so the higher the ladder it is, the more positive feelings there are, and the lower the feelings there are at the bottom of the ladder, the more negative those feelings are. Okay, so not surprisingly, we want to be as high as possible. Me too. Okay. However, there's only one feeling ladder. So as I said, there are two ways of using the same mind. Right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put a feeling ladder on this side of the mind. Right? And the same ladder, not a different ladder, on the other side of using the mind. An important thing to remember, this is not two different feeling ladders. They are one and the same, just two perspectives of it. One perspective on this side of the red line and another perspective on the other side of the red line. Two different perspectives, and therefore we have two different ways of understanding feelings. Now, like you guys as well, we've all been learning about these three principles from Sticky Banks. The principle of mind, the principle of consciousness, and the principle of thought. Put all three together, create the reality we now have. Okay, which means if you've got a reality now, which you do because you wouldn't be able to see me on your screen otherwise, it proves the existence of these three principles. Now, I have learned from Kate Blevins and Valden Monroe for coming up to 9 years now, and we're still learning. So it talks about on one side of the red line where the principles are included, and on the other side of the red line, the principle is as if the principles are not included. Okay, so all of this is taking place in mind. Two ways of using the same mind, both of them using one mind. Therefore, both of them is in mind. Right. So this side, there's the knowing that there's a principle at play, and on this side, it's as if nothing to do with the three principles. And another quote from Citibank, again, one of my, well, I was going to say one of my favorites, but I've got so many favorites, it's silly to have one of my favorites. Okay. And it's this one here. One of the most beautiful things any human can realize is the mystical bridge between the form and the formless. The principle of thought is that bridge. And there is the quote from Keith's upcoming book as well. Keith, could you tell us what the quote from the book is about the principle of mind, please?
Oh, yes. Mind as the intelligence of all things before creation and after creation. That's it.
The intelligence of all things before creation and after creation. Okay, so again, there's many words to describe that we are calling after creation, like form. Form is another one. And we have feelings here, and feelings are always a creation. It has to be in creation, otherwise we wouldn't be able to feel those feelings. Okay, because if it wasn't created, how could you feel it? We have the positive and the negative. Same on that side, the positive and the negatives. So we had this bridge that turned the formless into form. Okay, so we can say that this feeling of form, and therefore I now need to put the bridge in here. And this bridge is what we call the principle of thought. Okay. And I will abbreviate it as POT. POT, in order to distinguish it from individual thought, like your thought, or my thought, or his thought, or her thought, or personal thought, or wisdom thought, or ego thought. We're talking about the principle of thought. Which is why I like to keep saying the principle of thought is not the same as the thoughts that we all have. Okay, so we have the principle of thought here. But on the other side, as I said, I think there are no principles. So I cannot put the principle of thought on this side. So this is getting very interesting now. So we have the principle of thought, and we have lots of feelings here. I don't know how many there are. It wouldn't surprise me if there were thousands, but I didn't go to the University of Feelings. Okay. On this side, I'm asking myself, this particular feeling up here, a positive one, how did that feeling come alive? Did it come through the principle of thought? I say, yes, it did. A positive feeling came via the principle of thought. What about a feeling down here? Did it come alive from the principle of thought? I say, yes, it does. What about this feeling here? Did this come alive via the principle of thought? Yes, it does. What about this feeling here? Yes, it does again. And I think we could do that on every feeling we can possibly have. There is no feeling on this ladder that did not come from the principle of thought. All of it is being realized via the principle of thought. Okay, so now I realize we're dealing with something a little bit different here. Because I'm asking myself, given all of these feelings, given how they come about, they all are the same. In other words, because they all came from the principle of thought. Yes, there are different qualities of feelings, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the nature of feeling. What are they made of? All feelings are made of thought, whether positive or negative. And this is why I like asking the question, what does every feeling, whether positive or negative, have in common? If you find that would declare what every feeling has in common, all the power to you. That's really great news. And it's this bit that made me realize I can feel any feeling and and it's still happening through thought, and I will still be okay, including the negatives. And for the first time, This explains why I've met many people and spoken with many people. When they have a negative state of mind, they still get insights. So insight is not based on how you are feeling, because every feeling by their nature is the same, thought created. Okay, so this is half the story of this way of using the mind. Okay, let's go to the other way of using the mind. But this time we cannot use the principle of thought. Okay, therefore we cannot attribute the feeling to the principle of thought because there is no principle of thought here. Therefore, we need to associate that feeling with something. There is a drive to associate the feeling with something in this way of using the mind, such as circumstances, events, the past, beliefs, other people, ideas about who we are, all these different possibilities. And this is only a very tiny fraction of what we could associate the feeling with. This is where it gets very interesting. Right? When we have a particular circumstance, I don't know that we can feel any feeling about the circumstance from this way of using the mind. It seems like there is one feeling to associate with the circumstance. They would go like this. Okay, so we have a positive feeling, and therefore the circumstance will appear positive. We can also have a past and make people struggle with the past. That I'm going to give it a negative feeling. Okay, other people could be anything, but let's say for the sake of argument, this particular feeling. Events, for example, my football team losing a game, I'll be feeling pretty bad. Okay, and what else is there? The beliefs, it could be this feeling or stuff could be down there, whatever. But I start noticing that if one of those things appears to be associated with a feeling, not every feeling, a feeling. Right? So when we have circumstances, for example, right, we associate it with a feeling, one part of the ladder, one part, not all of it. Therefore, circumstances alone is not sufficient to tell us what the nature of every feeling is. It can only tell us about one feeling. Same with events, same with the past, same with beliefs, same with other people, and same with ideas about ourselves. So this is how what we call the outside in occurs. One way of using the mind is called the outside in way. I don't think Citibank ever named those two ways of using the same mind, so we're just giving it names so we can talk about it. So we're calling this the outside in way of using the mind, because we are associating the feeling with something that isn't thought. Or rather, I should say, it was something that appears not to be a thought. All of it is thought, but it looks like it's not. So here we have feeling associated with whatever is outside of thought, outside of us. Right? So one way of using the mind, another way of using the mind.
Sid is talking to Roger Mills. He brings up this truth about two ways of using the same mind. And he asks Roger to look at the tree in the yard out Sid's picture window and says, in effect, says something like, "Do you see two trees?" And Roger says, "Two trees?" It's really quite a lovely account of what Sid was seeing, both trees. Um, Roger at that moment could not. And it really confused Roger. Sid made his point. Uh, Even though Roger couldn't see two trees, he was intrigued by Sid's seeming contradiction to Roger, um, which wasn't a contradiction at all to Sid. I just love it. It's so eloquent. And I was also recalling the storm of controversy that Sid brought to all of our minds uh, with the assertion in one of the first books written about the principles that feelings was a principle. That also danced across my mind, and it reminded me something about the principles and about two ways of using the same mind that struck me. And Sid definitely did not want. He had a big problem with this first book claiming that feelings was a principle.
So again, when I first heard that story, feelings are not a principle. Wow. I mean, for example, the way we feel changes all day long, right? Therefore, it can't be a principle. A principle must have something constant and unchanging. There's no way feeling fit the definition of a universal principle. So what I saw was that feeling is a non-principle. It's not a one is better than the other. It's just called a non-principle. So yeah, there are two ways of using the same mind. So now we've got two different ways of understanding feeling. We have one where the nature of every feeling is exactly the same. And over here, I'm now going to demonstrate why the feeling on this way of using the mind cannot be understood as being the same. Okay, so I'm just going to remove these connections for now. So let's say we have a negative feeling about the past. Just take an example. Okay. And I do my best to observe people, what they do when they start thinking about the past. Right? Now I'm not talking about what are they thinking, but what are they trying to do? What are they trying to get to? What are they trying to achieve? And I realize really is that they want a positive feeling about the past. Okay, by changing the past or by fixing the past or by having the past be something they can make an illusionary peace with, whatever. Okay, so that the past could no longer contaminate our present everyday life. Okay. So what people do is they try to look for a positive feeling about the past as if the positive feeling will stop them from being in the world of the past. Okay. So I'm thinking, you know what? They're trying to go from there to there to there to there. Okay. But there's something not quite adding up here because how can the same path create two different feelings? Okay, would it possible outside in, sorry, inside out? Yes, but outside in doesn't quite make sense because without the principle of thought to keep the entire ladder one, we start splitting it. On here, we can't do that because every feeling, positive or negative, by their nature is exactly the same. Therefore, there is nothing between any of the feelings to distinguish it from each other. But on the other side, we don't have the underlying nature of every feeling. Therefore, all we have is the quality of feeling. Okay, so what do we do? So what we do is we split the ladder in two. There's nothing to keep it one. So we're going to go over here and create a line here. Okay, and this is where what people call this category of feeling positive and this category of feeling negative, or this category feeling as good and this category feeling as bad, or this category feeling as high and this category feeling as low. And I started saying, you know what? When people hear the term, you need to feel better, look for a better feeling, or that kind of thing. And because and depending on their understanding of the principle, and for most people in the world, they have none, right? What they try to do is that they try to get from one place in this part to this place. Okay. Meaning they're going from a feeling in the outside in, a negative one, to a positive feeling, but still in the outside in. I think all of us are quite familiar with this. How many times have we tried to change the way we feel? And in the time that we succeed in changing the feeling, but it's like a placebo effect. It's very short term. It didn't last. It wasn't meaningful. It wasn't transformative. That's because most people are trying to get from there to there. And here is now a massive industry in which people make money from it. They try to come up with ways in terms of how to get from here to there, called technique. We're trying to use technique to get them from the negative to the positive. But with these three principles, this is the outside in way of using the mind. We can't do that. I can't stop you from doing it, but Kate and I, we just can't do that. It's not fair on the person trying to find a way out. The way out is not this way. The way out is to cross this red line over here. What's also known as a paradigm shift, a spiritual paradigm shift.
May I say one other thing? Just as this is reading from an author and calling core feelings. So the core feelings to this author are love, joy, peace of mind, and this is I'm reading quotes, as manifested in many desirable feelings like gratitude and humility are the core essential feelings in human beings. Although these feelings might be overridden by people's momentary thoughts, they are indeed the default setting, the homeostasis in the human race. But by making that category on the right there, as you're calling, um, to call them core feelings, uh, is a misrepresentation of the left side of the diagram.
Yeah, so the positive feeling being described as a core feeling. I'm asking myself, which of the two feeling ladders are they using? And think there's a heavy emphasis on the positivity, and there's nothing to separate the positivity and the negativity because they're all the same by their nature. This author is describing this area. So when I hear people feeling in a state of gratitude, that's not enough to let me know which of the two ways they are using their mind. Because there's gratitude there, but guess what? There's gratitude there as well. There's joy there, and there's joy there as well. Something that is on both sides of a red line is not sufficient to mark the difference between the two. So people think of this as, if you're in that feeling, then I will be okay. Okay, so if I can get, so we might come up with an idea that if I could have this feeling, then I will be okay. It's a very tempting thing. I mean, I believed in it for many years until I realized it didn't work that way. But once I believe this, rest assured I'm going to do whatever I can to be in this category of feelings. Well, guess what? The mind goes a lot further than this. The outside in mind goes a lot further than this. Because we don't have to split the feeling ladder in one place. We can split it further. So, for example, let's say we split. I'm here, and I manage to change the way I feel to something like here, right? But it's above this little red line. It's above it. I've now met the criteria to be okay. So I'm feeling it. Am I feeling okay? You know what? No, I'm not feeling okay. I've still got to do something to get the okayness. So I thought, you know what? I don't think this feeling is good enough. So I'm going to create another split here. And now I'm going to work even harder because now I need to get up to this one. And because this area here is getting smaller and smaller, it's getting harder and harder. It's going to take more effort. It's going to take more training. It's going to take more willpower just to get there. I tell you, it's hell. We shouldn't have to go through hell to be okay. For those of you who are interested in, let's call it mainstream psychology, they do the same thing, but in a different way. I'll explain now. Keep in mind, I'm no psychologist. I didn't write this DSM, but I can give you my take on it. So let's restore this ladder to its former glory. It seems that most of their diagnoses, the one that I've read in the DSM anyway, right, they seem to split this feeling ladder twice. One about here and another one about here. And they even give it their name as well. They call this area healthy. This area, something along the line of too high to be healthy, and down there, too low to be healthy. So they're saying, if you fit in this category, then I will diagnose you as being healthy. But if you're in this category, say you need some sessions with a psychologist. If you're down here, Sorry, need some sessions with the psychologist. Right? But let's compare this to this. Every feeling on this ladder cannot be separated because the nature of every feeling is the same. Here, we are splitting the ladder 3 times, and therefore psychology is coming up with 3 different natures of feelings. Cool.
Could I say one other thing about this? It's very illustrative point you're making. The I have actually seen people in events that I'm attending with Sid argue with Sid and condemn Sid for being negative. And Sid, this was a relatively small group, but Sid tore him apart um, with his admonishing Sid for being negative. He wanted him to change, and in a way, this person had this belief that Sid missed it, and he wanted to bring it up to Sid in this group of advanced practitioners, and Sid tore him apart. And I realize now this person was advocating the right side of this diagram, and he was condemning of Sid. But Sid would not have it, and he let him know about it for like a 30-minute diatribe. And I realized because this person had a problem with any, and he had heard Sid's negativity about people or 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 practitioners and condemned it and had the gall to bring it up in this format, and it really seared into my mind. We're really missing something here with a kind of forced positivity that this particular practitioner was sold on. Just as an example, I'm not trying to point any fingers at all. I'm just trying to say this pertains to the principles wholeheartedly and completely.
So Sticky Band had his negative moment, but he was still inside out.
Yes.
Okay, so 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 I'm going to so I only put this up to explain what the DSM really is, I think, for the most part. Like I said, I don't know the DSM, but staying the split and realize most of the diagnosis is based on an outside-in paradigm, the outside-in way of using the mind. We're going a different direction. We're going this way, where you cannot split the feeling ladder. Each and every one of us would love to have an insight. I've never met anybody who doesn't want an insight. But guess what? We split the ladder again, and we have this category here. If we could be up here, then we could have an insight. And I'm just going, what? Really? I was saying that insight is only possible when you have a positive feeling. There have been many times in my own life when I was down in the dump at a very low place and I had insight. So the idea that insight is exclusive to a particular category of feelings, it does not resonate with my own experience of having insights. Okay, now, interestingly, uh, we cannot split this ladder. Therefore, I can put in here insight, right? But because all the feelings are the same, I'm doing this. Absolutely, there is no feeling, whether positive or negative, that can take away the capacity for insight. There is no feeling, positive or negative, that can promote insight. Because feeling, the quality of feeling, is not the determinant for having insight. Very interesting. So we have feeling, we have insight, regardless of how you feel. So this raises an incredible question. Would you rather have a particular feeling so that you can have an insight? Or would you like to have an insight regardless of how you feel? I've asked that question to many clients so far, and every one of them, without hesitating, said this one. They want insight regardless of how they feel. Another way is we don't even have to use insight. What about resilience? Same question again. Would you rather have a particular feeling so that you can be resilient, or would you rather be resilient regardless of how you feel? I don't hear anybody else talk about this. Isn't it really good to know that you can be resilient regardless of how you feel? Isn't it so good that we don't have to come up with the condition that creates a prescription in effort and willpower in order to get this kind of resilience? This is a pre-existing resilience. This is a man-made resilience. Why is this pre-existing? Because the principle of thought is neutral. It's the bridge for something to come into form. And what is it that goes through the bridge? We have the formless, or before creation. As I type it in, BC, before creation. You have lots of words like thought, like formless, or the intelligence of all things, or the nothingness, or the infinite potential for insight, the infinite potential for resilience, the infinite potential for knowledge, the infinite potential for possibilities, the infinite potential for answers. It's all here. And this goes through the principle of thought, and then suddenly we are having it as a feeling. So the principle of thought and what goes into the principle of thought can never be separated. So when you hear people say, I know a thought, I'm waiting for where's the insight. So this and this come together. They are one. Okay. And if the before created is where insight lives, is where resilience lives, is where confidence lives, is where love lives. This is why we say love is the answer. It comes from there. But it's before the principle of thought. But without the principle of thought, there's nothing for the before created to come into creation. That's why the principle of thought is the missing link. It's not the missing link anymore, it's now the found link, as Kate would say. It's the found link. So we have to before this. So So one last thing, a really interesting question again. So, as I said before, I am not denying or belittling or rejecting the existence of qualitative feeling. They come as feeling. No denying that. But I'm not looking in that direction. I'm looking in the direction of the nature of feeling that explains every feeling. Okay. But I want to ask you a question. But we have positivity up here. Down there, because the two ladders are the same, two different interpretations of the same thing. Okay, so the question I want to ask is, would you rather have a positive outside-in feeling or a negative inside-out feeling? Sarah said, hands down, negative feeling inside out. We're on the same wavelength, Sarah. So now the question becomes, why is this better than this? And I'll tell you, this is why. This is present in this way of using the mind. So when you have the created and the before created in the same way of using the mind, the same dimension, you are connected to wisdom. There's another word for it, wisdom. But over here, you're going to have feeling, but where's the wisdom? I'm supposed to be where I am, but where's the wisdom that I deserve? It's not happening. So yes, I agree. I'd rather be here than here any day of the week, because every feeling will be conditional on something. Here, we're getting the feeling, and that's good enough. So, and that redefined what is meant by positive. We think of positive to mean this as positive. But I realize now that Sticky Pan, when he talked about listening for a positive feeling, he's talking about all of this being a positive way of using the mind. Positive. And that's what he means by when he said, listen for a positive feeling. He's asking you to listen in here and not over here. Therefore, for the first time ever, I finally went beyond the words when Sticky Pan said, listen for a positive feeling. There it is. I mean, those words, listening for a positive feeling, is so easy to turn it into a prescription, isn't it? But I wanted to go beyond the word. He kept saying it. Don't listen to my words. In fact, I'm going to say the same thing. Please don't take anything I say as being true. So this is the positive way of using the mind, and this is the negative way of using the mind. The negative way of using the mind has positive feelings in it, but it's still a negative way of using the mind. And the positive way of using the mind has negative feelings in it, but no problem. Because every feeling is the same, because it came via thought. This is also known as the security paradigm. This is the insecurity paradigm. Insecurity paradigm. Insecurity way of using the mind, the secure using the way of mind. Another one, psychologists, they think you've got to be a certain feeling to be mentally healthy. Right? Which we've spoken about. But I realize this is the mental health paradigm, the mentally healthy way of using the mind, and would have both the positive and the negative feeling. Over here, we have the mentally ill or mentally sick way of using the mind, which has both the positive and the negative feelings. And this is why when Keith and I work with clients, we're not really interested in the quality of feeling. We're interested in which of the two ways of using the mind are they using to understand what they're going through. Are they over here or are they over here? Regardless of the quality of the feeling they're having, regardless of the quality of the experience they're having, regardless of what is in their realities. Feeling, experience, reality, what you see, what you hear, they are all creations. All of it. Mood, emotions, imagination, concept, ideas. There'll be hundreds more. They are in creation. So mental health paradigm, that's all we do. We expose it as much as we can. Lastly, over here, without the principles, every feeling has power because Citibank came up with a formula. And he wrote it down as mind plus consciousness plus thought. And I mean the principle of mind, the principle of consciousness, the principle of thought, not our mind or our consciousness or our thought. No, no, no. Principle of mind, principle of consciousness, and principle of thought equals reality. Diddy said it himself. He wrote it. And it's on page 42 of the Enlightened Gardener Revisited. Check it out. He did it. Okay, so let's talk about where the power lies. So we have these three principles that seem to have the power to create reality, or are the created or feeling, whatever. So the power to create reality does not come from reality or the created. It comes from the principles. Okay? Which means reality doesn't have the power. The source is the use of these three principles and not reality. Therefore, if we look at this, we see the power lies here, because that's where the principle is. And therefore, all of those feelings does not have the power. It has no ability of its own to take over your mind. It has no ability of its own to make you insecure. It has no ability of its own to perpetuate itself. It has no ability to multiply thoughts in your mind. It has no ability to do anything. Why? Because when you're there, you already know the nature of the feeling, regardless of the quality it is. Because they are all thought created. On this side, however, we have the same formula, but it is as if there are no principles. So what do? We have to remove the principles, and suddenly the power lies where this is. This has the power, or the feeling has the power. That therefore all these feelings in this way of using the mind has the power. This is why people feel out of control. It feels like they can't help the thought they're having in mind. I can't help it, I can't stop it. And also, for some people, they promote letting go. When feelings have the power, good luck letting go, because you won't. But over here, there's nothing to let go, because all the feelings have no power in the first place. So the three principles effectively bring you back home to where genuine power is in the first place. Over here, because we've lost the power, we then come up with ideas of how do we get it back. Here come the techniques. Kate and I are now very heavily focused on the nature of feeling, not the quality of feeling. Every feeling by their nature is the same. They are all thought created. There are no feelings that are exempt from this law. But that law can be overwritten via an illusion if we are using the mind this way, the upside-in way. The good news is that it only takes one thought. Doesn't matter how far down you've gone upside in. It takes one thought for you to go from this way of using the mind to this way of using the mind. Well, that's great news, because to be secure is never more than one thought away. To be mentally healthy is never more than one thought away. To be resilient is never more than one thought away. You're one paradigm away, you're one dimension away, you're one thought away from using the mind differently. It is not a case of changing your circumstances. It's not a case of changing who you are with. It's not a case of changing your feelings. It's not a case of doing something about the past. It's not a case of dropping beliefs. It looks like those are the things we need to change, those that we can be over there. No, it isn't. It is one thought away. And thought does not take place in time, which means you could be one thought away now. There's nothing about the formula, mind, thought, and consciousness, that talks about time. So each and every one of us has the right to be mentally healthy. Each and every one of us has the right to be mentally sick. If you can learn the differences between the two at the level of principles, then you'll start using one of them more than the other. That's all it takes. As I said, principles. It's always all about the principles, not the non-principles. Before creation is not a principle. After creation is not a principle. The principle of thought is a principle. Another reason why we're doing this webinar to bring to your attention that Kate and I are starting a training program January 2026. Right? And what we've just gone through is just one small aspect of what the three principles have uncovered. So if you are interested, please send me an email. We can meet up on Zoom and talk about it. Okay, so hopefully you can see the universal nature of feeling now instead of qualities of feeling, which is not universal.
And if you want more information about the program, let us know.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. It was
Mahalo.
lovely to see you, and thank you for your audience as well as your listener. So take care, God bless, all the very best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.